if you were to write down notes on classical conditioning, this is what they should look like. And if you don't know that Pavlov is a person, literally write in parentheses, write something that'll crack you up. Write dude. This is a dude, you know. Write this is some old guy. I don't know, a professor, whatever. But write that it's a person. Just do dash marks. Write involuntary. Why would I say involuntary? Anybody? It's like a reflex, right? And that's one of the differences between classical conditioning and what? Perfect. See? If you happen to be a doodler, doodle a drooling dog. Seriously, I'll write sometimes in the margins, I'll write stuff like that. I'll just write ridiculous things, or I'll sometimes write a joke, because it'll loosen up my brain. Now, when I look at something like that, can anybody tell me what those things stand for? Very good. Did anybody else look at that besides me when they first saw it and think, am I doing math? Because I thought this was a psych class. Anybody do that? No, just me? Okay, so here's how to write it in your notes. Well, actually, here's how it looks to me. So that's what my dad does when he writes notes, but I can't handle it. So, right. We're going to make it easy. Write it like this. Write the full words, because basically if you can't say it, then you can't really comprehend it. You may have a good idea, but you won't be able to put it right back down on a piece of paper on a test. And what happens if one day you walk into a class like my oceanography class that I'm taking right now, and you get handed an actual test that's not on a Scantron? So try to say the words out loud, and when you're actually learning, get up and walk around. Speak it in your mouth. Get it into these muscles. Get it into your body. You'll say unconditioned stim, UCS, right? Causes natural involuntary response. And meat powder, why? Because that's going to cue you to remember. So who knows what the whole situation is with classical conditioning, and why did I write meat powder up here? We got UCS and CS and all of that. Come on, somebody's got to be able to tell me what the meat powder is all about. The drooling dog? Okay. Let's go back here. We're here right now. We're kind of here and we're kind of here. But let's go back to that. So there's this dude, okay? And his last name was Pavlov. And he was actually, I can't remember what he was studying, I think digestion. That's right. What he figured out, he actually had his dogs hooked up to these, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a tube that catches saliva. And every time he would go and feed the dogs, or he'd like sprinkle meat powder, they'd salivate, so they'd drool, right? And we all know dogs drool. So one day he's sitting there taking notes, and he notices that the dogs are drooling whenever he comes into view. So he walks into the room, the dogs drool. He's a researcher, he's a scientist, so he's writing it down, he's taking notes, and he's able to measure then that there's actually an increase in this involuntary behavior. Make sense? Okay, does this sound familiar? Awesome, okay. So, what he did was he ended up stopping the whole thing with digestion. He got a lot more interested in this conditioning, is what he called it, in this response. Dun, dun, dun. There we go, that's what it should look like. And he categorized the information that he was getting, which is basically what I was talking about when we try to organize information so that we can get it into our brains. What he did was he organized the information that he was taking in his notes, and he named things like unconditioned stimulus, which was the meat powder, which causes an unconditioned response, which is the drooling, because it's involuntary. I see people taking notes. You're making me nervous now. I got to go back to that panic picture. And then we have conditioned stimulus, which was when he walked in the room, right? So now what we have is an unrelated stimulus. What we have is an unrelated action, which was Pavlov walking into the room. Unrelated to what? to drooling, we hope. Right. It's unrelated. So the food would naturally cause the salivation. That's a natural combination. It's a reflex action, right? Pavlov walks into the room, the dogs drool. That's a conditioned response. Or sorry, conditioned stim. The conditioned response is the drool. So is everybody clear on that? Okay. So we have something also called higher order conditioning, which I'm going to touch on much later. But the idea is that if Pavlov always walked in with, say, an assistant, okay, every time that he fed them with a meat powder or a steak or whatever, then the dogs would eventually associate not only Pavlov, but the person he was walking in with also with meat powder. So eventually Pavlov could even remove himself from the whole situation. The assistant could walk in the room and the dogs would drool. Does that make sense? This is a fictional example, but so higher order conditioning. An SD. Can anybody tell me what this is? I can't say this word, by the way. I'm really bad at it. Say it again? Discriminative, exactly. Can you describe it?
It's something that, like, say if you tell the dog to sit, then he'll respond and sit, and then you give him and then you have to reinforce him by like giving him a treat.
Kind of, sort of, kind of, not quite. Let's see. An example would be. I've got two examples in my head, right off the top of my head. One is you hang out with your best buddies. You go and you're having some non-alcoholic beverages with your best buddies. And you start telling jokes as the night wears on. You're having a lot of fun. Your jokes start to get a little bit crustier and crustier, maybe a little raunchy. And then the next day you go to church and you talk to your priest and you start joking with the priest. Do you tell him the same jokes? Why not? That's right, which is something that causes you to discriminate. Exactly. That clear? A clearer example, because you could say it was the priest's collar, you could say it was, something having to do with churches. A clearer example, it's a lot more clinical, is if you were to take a pigeon, stick the pigeon in a box. Teach the pigeon that if it presses a lever, it gets a pellet. Okay? The pigeon likes the pellet, because that's all pigeons do is eat, right? They eat, poop, sleep, and fly. Do they even sleep? Give me something. Come on, guys. Okay, so if you then attach a light bulb inside of the box, the pigeon presses the lever, it's used to getting a pellet every time, right? Okay, so if the pigeon presses the lever and sometimes gets a pellet and sometimes doesn't, and you've hooked up this light bulb so that it lights up only when there is a pellet, but it's dead when there isn't, then the pigeon will eventually learn not to bother pressing the lever unless that light's on. Does that make sense? Okay, so what can you think of? Can anyone think of an everyday example where we might do something like that in our lives? Where we might... Go ahead.
Well, the language you use around your friends, sometimes you don't use around your parents.
There you go. So you're discriminating. And you might also not use that same language around your kids. One would hope. I don't know. It's just personal preference. I don't know. So on your learning assignment that you have, Dr. Randall has referred to that as SD, just so you know. All right, well, let's look at something far more exciting than me. There we go.
Oh, damn, lost another file. Gonna have to reboot again. Hey, Dwight, do you want an Altoid?
What do you think?
In school, we learned about this scientist who trained dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell by feeding them whenever a bell rang. So for the past couple weeks, I've been conducting a similar experiment. Dwight, want an Altoid?
Okay.
Altoid?
Sure.
Intoid?
Input? Yes.
What are you doing?
I
What?
don't know. Well, my mouth tastes so bad all of a sudden.
Oh.
Okay. Let's see. So who can tell me what was what? So you can say stim. That's what I do.
Stim was on the sound on the computer.
Right?
The unconditioned response was the guy doing pressing, messing with the mouse, and that's all I got.
Okay. I think this one is actually a little bit tricky because you don't know that Dwight is experiencing rotten mouth until the end of the clip. But the rotten mouth and his whole dry mouth situation, that's an involuntary response, right? So the mint that he's getting, what do you think that is? It's definitely stim. That's the unconditioned stim originally. And then the conditioned stim, which is the one that's not related to the involuntary response initially. The sound of the computer, exactly. So that brings us, I left one out. Unconditioned response. Well, we've got the conditioned response and the unconditioned response, which are actually, they're the same but for different reasons. Can you tell me why? Because it's the rotten mouth, right? The dry mouth. So he gets the dry mouth, he takes a mint. He eats a mint, and the mint alleviates the dry mouth. But now he's getting dry mouth at the end when he hears the sound of the computer. So what he's doing is he's having this response, which is now a conditioned response, because it's conditioned, it's hinging on hearing that sound. Anybody ever had an experience like that yourself? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
My dad every Friday gets bomb pizza, and once he didn't get it, and I'm like, man, I want it so bad. On Friday I really want it.
So
I always want it on Friday.
it's a Friday thing. There you go. How about anybody ever give a presentation, and even though they've run to the bathroom 16 times before they get up on stage or up in front of the room? Anybody have that feeling right before they get up in front of people? It's an involuntary experience, right? It's involuntary. And what's triggering it? Well, fear, but nervousness. But it's a situation of not actually being able to go, right? It's a situation of being in front of people.
This also like kind of like say like used to going home after school, kind of like a routine, and then somehow it breaks it up.
Yeah, because repetition is really important with any kind of conditioning, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, did I cut you off?
No.
Okay.